cards. So stop by any Guam or CNMI Shell station and start saving today. Visit bankofguam.com for more information. Terms and conditions apply. Bank of Guam, the People's Bank. Member FDIC.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And I was remiss yesterday by not opening the show by wishing all and sundry in my international radio listening audience Happy Gun Pride Month. You'll remember that July is Gun Pride Month, where we're going to carry our firearms. We're going to be out and proud. And I was hoping that a group of activists here would pick up the rifle and start a gun pride parade on the 4th of July. Well, if it doesn't happen, it's okay, because we're still proud that we are pro-gun, pro-Second Amendment, pro-Constitution, pro-Bill of Rights, pro-tall tales. Yeah, right. Pro-tall tales, absolutely. Yeah, so here we go on another exciting adventure of Tall Tales. And the first thing on the agenda here for Tall Tales is, what do we call it, Real Joe Cruz?
Second Amendment tidbits.
We've done Second Amendment tidbits already. What comes next, Real Joe?
Meet the press.
Meet the press. Meet the press, oftentimes referred to on Tall Tales as Zemi-i-Kotni. Press the meet. Meet the press. Get it? It's a play on words. A bilingual backwards play on words. Typical of the strange sense of humor of the ever-popular host of the program called Tall Tales, who isn't exactly altitudinally challenged himself. So here we go on Tall Tales, and you recall I've got my blue pencil here. I look at the editorials from our two daily newspapers. I search each one of them for grammatical errors and errors in the usage of the English language. And when I find an error, I unmercifully hop on it and correct it. I analyze the editorials for content, accuracy, factualness, topicality, edginess, readability, and whether or not it's something that we can all kind of sink our teeth into. Having done that, I will take my blue pencil and award the better of the two editorials the coveted blue star. So far, the score is... Let's see here. Post 122, PDN 43. And Post wins more than twice as often as the Daily News. But of course, one of the reasons for that is that the Post tries every time. The Daily News tries about once or twice a week. Instead of writing homegrown editorials about something that about things that occur here on the island or affect us here on the island, or things that we're interested in, the Daily News runs stuff from Gannett, USA Today, that probably has negative or minus interest here on the island. Today is no exception. Here is a really exciting editorial that ran in today's Daily News. Are you ready for this now? Fasten your seatbelts. Get out your pencils. You may want to take notes on this. This is what it's about. Let's talk about the concussion injuries for women. This is one of the most serious problems on our island. Concussion injuries for women. Yeah. So it's about, let's see, I'll just read the first sentence of it to see if you think I should go any further. After taking a ball to the head, estimated to be traveling 60 miles per hour in the last minute of a tie match in April 2013, Amy Wambach of the Western New York Flash collapsed helplessly and rolled into the fetal position. It sounds like kind of bad news, but is the soccer team called the Western New York Flash, is that what we would call top of the mind awareness here on Guam? Do you think there are any more than a half dozen people on the island who could get past the first sentence without yawning and saying, so what? Yeah, that's typical of the stuff that the Daily News puts on its editorial page and calls an editorial. So needless to say, the Post won't have much competition for today. And here's the Post. Gov Guam's enormous debt baggage, a concern for us all. Well, Gov Guam, at least it's about something going on here on Guam. Now, if it's about somebody getting hit in the head with a ball, that could happen on Guam too. But Gov Guam's enormous debt baggage, a concern for us all. Residents have choices before them, and paying more taxes and higher rates will become increasingly difficult to swallow. I certainly don't want to pay higher taxes. I don't want to pay higher fees. Do you, Real Joe Cruz?
No, sir.
No. Every trip a government of Guam official makes at the public's expense. We just had a couple make a trip to that committee of the United Nations and then to march in the gay parade. Remember that? I wonder how much that cost you and me, Real Joe Cruz. How much, if you were asked, how much would you be willing to pay? A little, not 1 red cent, right?
Nada.
Yeah, but since the government's paying it, it doesn't cost us anything, right?
No.
Yeah, every amount of his or her agency spends on non-essentials such as catered food for government ribbon cutting, festivals on the taxpayer dime, glossy newsletters that can be sent instead by email, fancy hotel venues for conferences and other expenses must pause. If I've said that, I've said it a million times myself. And I usually come in with this line, what I want to see, I don't know if anybody else does, but what I want to see is an effective, efficient government operating within the rule of law, providing basic government services on at least a break-even basis, and maybe even better than a break-even basis. If we could do it on a better than break-even basis, we could start paying down the $2.3 billion debt that we owe. An effective, efficient government operating within the rule of law, providing basic government services on at least a break-even basis. No frills, no fancy stuff, no treats, no 100 people to Hawaii for Festpac. None of that stuff. Every expensive office rent for non-essential government offices and functions must end. Payroll and benefit costs seriously must be reviewed to identify where the fat should be trimmed. Why? One of the more compelling reasons is that the local government has been piling tax and fee increases on us while Gov Guam, according to the recently audited 2018 budget year, has spent beyond its means. A repeat, as you report, it released by public auditor Benjamin Cruz showed. And for those who didn't notice the recent release for the U.S. Government Accountability Report, find time to read it. It's posted at a website called postguam.com. The GAO put the public debt on Guam into perspective. Guam's public debt has more than doubled from $1 billion a decade ago to $2.6 billion in the 2017 budget year. $2.6 billion. Boy, that's some pretty serious money.
With a B?
With a B.
Okay.
Billion, not million.
Okay.
This public debt can be broken down to $16,106 for every man, woman, and child on the island, based on a population of 162,500 in 2017. That's an increase in debt per capita of $15,334 2 years earlier. That's an increase, yeah, okay. GovGuam's debt burden of $2.6 billion is nearly half the size of Guam's annual economic output. Getting up pretty close to a tipping point there, aren't we? The government's pension liabilities at $1.6 billion are nearly 28% of the entire amount of goods and services the island produces in 1 year. The GAO report identifies the biggest borrowers as the Guam Power Authority, turn over and look at the back here. Guam Power Authority at $592 million, Guam Water Works Authority $534 million, Wonpat Airport $226 billion, among the agencies that crank out their own revenue. Now, I got to stop here for a second and perhaps say that this isn't as bad as it might appear. Governments have to borrow money to make capital improvements. Things like the new airport building, the modifications to the airport, new power plants, new water plant, new sewer plants, etc. And if for no other reason than if, let's say, we built a new power plant this year that cost us $10 million, and we built it this year, and we wanted to pay for it all, would it be fair to have the folks that happen to be paying taxes this year to pick up the whole $10 million? Or would it make more sense to spread that $10 million over the useful life of the power plant, say the next 40 years? Well, the way you do that is that you borrow money. So some of this may not be as bad as it seems. It's when we borrow money for operations, which we've done so many times, that we really get into trouble. Going on with the editorial, each year the local government will face rising debt payments. This puts pressure on GovGuam to make taxpayers foot the tab even more. Ditto with GPA and GWA, which are already hitting ratepayers with high power and water costs. GovGuam's borrowing and GPA, GWA's debts are hitting our pockets on multiple fronts. These have affected our ability to afford living on Guam. Residents have choices before them. Paying more taxes and higher rates will become increasingly difficult to swallow. We're not like bankrupt Puerto Rico yet. Let me repeat that sentence. We're not like bankrupt Puerto Rico yet. But when things got dire for many residents of Puerto Rico, their choices were to stay home and live in hardship or to seek some place in the States where they can live better. Puerto Rico is a cautionary example for Guam. Well, pretty good editorial, and there's not much doubt about it today. The coveted blue star goes to the point. Pretty easy to win the boxing match when the other boxer doesn't even put on his gloves, right? Real Joe Cruz. Yeah. Okay, well, I'm just now starting the program, and I've already got a phone call from Jesse. So good afternoon, Jesse.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, the debt that apparently almost half of the debt that Guam incurred was a result from federal court orders.
No, I don't know that, Jesse. I don't know that at all.
So what I want to know,
you're saying that half the debt is from federal court orders?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Tax refunds, right?
Tax refunds?
The tax refund court order.
Okay, you mean the fact that we have to pay refunds on taxes on a timely basis is because of a federal court order, right?
I don't know. I think that's what happened.
Yeah, because the tax refunds were 2 and 3 years late and paid on a kind of a who you know, not what we owe you basis.
Right.
Yeah. So a couple of taxpayers brought that to court to make the government do what the government's supposed to do. So what's your point, Jesse?
No. My point is that the if the federal government, how does it all work with, you're saying that we're not a state, we're not independent, so we have an organic act, but it's not really. It only can be changed by the Congress. So in a way, it almost seems as if the Fed's suing themselves.
It seems like what?
You know what I mean?
It seems like what?
It seems like the federal government is suing itself, or the island. They're suing us. It just, I don't know, just doesn't all make sense,
Yeah, okay, well, to stop right there, that was one of the defenses raised in the taxpayer suit, that since the income tax on Guam is a feature of the Organic Act, which most people would say is a federal law, I'd say it's a national law, that the suit wouldn't lie against the government of Guam. But it went all the way to the Ninth Circuit, and it didn't turn out that way. So I hear what you're saying, but move on to your next point.
And then the other one is the Clean Water Act. Apparently the GPA and GWA violated those things. But what I also heard from someone, talking to somebody, was that those things were intended for large states, not to affect like rural communities. You know what I mean? But they did that for with us for the dump. I think they did it for us for waterworks and for GPA, if I'm not mistaken. But
well, as far as waterworks
is hundreds millions, you know what I mean?
As far as waterworks was concerned, the U.S. was going to sue because we were putting out Hanum Taki, and that was about the time that the CCU started, and we were able to literally clean up our water, so no suit was filed. As far as the dump, leachate from the dump was flowing into the Lawnfit River and polluting the Lawnfit River. And, it took about 20 years before the feds finally filed suit. But they did. Yeah, what was the other example you made?
And then I think it was GPA. I'm not too sure what day, but there was something in there, I think, that they had to borrow money. GPA also had to borrow money to comply with the court order or something. I may be wrong there, but I think.
Okay, so what you're saying is
that oil spill or something like that went into the.
I think it was probably sulfur, the sulfur smoke, or the high sulfur oil we were burning. So your point, I think, is this, Jesse, that that because Guam is a colony. And we have all this debt because the federal government keeps suing us. Is that right?
Well, kind of. I mean, I
kind of.
That, I mean, in a way, it seems that way because.
So if it weren't for that, if we were an independent Guam, we could keep drinking our Hanum Taki and no one would bother us.
No, but that's not the point. The point is that they put this restrict. They've come down and said, okay, this is federal. You have to do it now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they've established these various environmental laws that apply to the entire country. But my point is this, Jesse. So an independent Guam wouldn't have those things nagging at it. So if the independent Guam wanted to put out Hanum Taki, no one would come along and say, you can't do that anymore, we're going to sue. Right?
Well, the people, we would have had to pay for that anyway. I didn't think, my point is I don't think they needed to sue us for it. You know what I mean? We could have just did that ourselves, you know?
Like the dump.
Yeah.
Yeah, boy, we really...
Actually, I'm sorry, I don't want to say it by myself. I didn't discuss that. I think, in my point of view, I think that the federal government should have helped because of the military. As a matter of fact, there was a lawsuit about the dump, about suing for the dump. They're suing the U.S. Navy because there was some agreement that was, apparently there was agreement back then where the Navy said, okay, we'll pay for half of or to close the dump or something like that.
What happened, Jesse, is that
during those times, the sewage lines and all those things, I know it wasn't the people of Guam, the Chamorros that did it after the war.
What happened was that, Jesse, here's what happened. The dump was used by the Navy even before the war, and then after the war, and then when, the Organic Act, then it became a government of Guam dump, and it was polluting, the leachate was polluting the Lonfit River. I don't know how closely you were following, but this went on for 25 years. We kept talking, well, we got to close the Orda dump. We got to close the... And we just didn't do it. It just never happened until Judge Francis Gatewood said, I'm tired of this, and appointed a receiver to do it, and it got done. Now, after that happened, the government of Guam did bring suit against the national government, saying, you guys need to make a contribution here because some of the problem was caused by the dump that the Navy built before 1950. And that suit's...
Gatewood didn't do that, man.
Jesse, that suit, it'll be easier for you to answer these questions when you know what the questions are. So that suit is still pending right now. But if we had waited, if we depended on the government of Guam to close that dump, it never, ever would have happened because there was no political will to do it. There's no good politics in spending money on a dump. And legislature after legislature dealt with it. Nothing ever happened until the suit was filed, and Judge Francis Gatewood, a Chamorro judge, Jesse, a Chamorro judge says, I'm appointing a receiver, and the receivers came in and closed it.
Well, I don't know why she didn't cite the fact that the Navy had to pay for it, too. She should have just did that.
Because that wasn't before the court. That's the reason.
So she should have told the governor that at the time and said, hey, why don't you guys go check with the Navy and then get back with me?
That kind of isn't the way things work in court, Jesse.
I'm just trying to say that, the depth, though, it was pretty alarming to me that nearly half of it was from the federal government. So I just wanted,
Okay, I hear what you're saying, but what you have to ask why, and it keeps coming back to the same thing. If we didn't have those environmental laws in place, then those suits wouldn't have occurred, but we'd be living with the things that those environmental laws dealt with. Hanum Taki, leachate from the dump, on and on and on. And I keep coming back to the same thing. Those things you wouldn't need to worry about that in an independent Guam. You wouldn't have the national government coming in here and talking about clean water and closing your dump, etc. You could do whatever you wanted.
Those are things that independent countries have to deal with anyways. You know what I mean? That's the whole point of it, is that those are the things that people could take pride in saying that we're an independent country. We need to fix these things because of the people who live here. Now, if we fail at it, then the people fail. And then all the outsiders can say, see, these stupid Chamorro people, they don't know how to run their damn island.
Why does it come back to the Chamorro people? Are there only Chamorros living on the island, Jesse?
Because the Chamorro people are supposed to be, they were apparently the indigenous people of the land. And that's the only way, apparently, that you could have voted for independence. It would be through the, because it's a human right
human rights. What? Tell me about human rights.
The United Nations, the indigenous rights, the self-determination for indigenous people.
I'm not familiar with that, Jesse. Can you give me a little school on that?
Man, I wish I could, but it's just there's the self-determination, and
Yeah.
I think
You don't know where it is, but you're pretty sure of what it is, and you're pretty sure it only addresses Chamorro. Only Chamorros are entitled to human rights, right, Jesse?
the native Chamorros are the indigenous.
But nobody else. If you're not a native Chamorro, you're not entitled to human rights.
You already had your human right of self-determination because you're part of people who were part of different countries now left those independent countries and came here.
So I've already had as many human rights as I could expect, right?
Huh?
I've had my quota of human rights, and I don't get any more human rights.
Well, the UN doesn't classify you as an indigenous person of the land. Oh, I don't know. Are you indigenous of Guam? Maybe.
When did I ever sign up to have the UN tell me what my human rights are, Jesse?
Well, I don't know. The UN seems to govern a lot of things in the world. You know what I mean?
Like what?
But then again, the UN is pretty much just rolling on the USA for now. So whatever.
The UN is what?
Basically the UN is like. It just listens to its daddy, you know what I mean? Its master, the United States. So whatever the United States says, they pretty much have to go.
So no matter how you come up with it, the United States is to blame, right, Jesse?
I mean,
I gotta take a break, Jesse. But I'm coming up on a break here, so I gotta.
Okay. All right. Have a good one, though.
Thank you very much, Jess.
Talk about it later. Okay.
All right. Short break. We'll be right back to the card.
GPSI Guam is a professional services company that is a registered contractor for the federal government. They're an SBA, 8A, and Hub Zone certified SDVOSB, providing program/project management, administration, technical support, logistics, and commodities. Find out more about GPSI and how they can help you today. For large prime companies, contact GPSI if you need assistance in meeting your small business subcontracting goals at 477-3058. They'll be happy to assist.
When it comes to power and performance, nothing compares to Dodge. And right now at Cars Plus in Mighty, you can save thousands on many Dodge vehicles in stock during our Dodge Performance Days. Like a new 2019 Grand Caravan SE, save $4,250, or save $6,150 on a new Durango SXT. Looking for more power? Take home a new Charger SXT Plus today for only $37,689, or save over $7,000 on a new Challenger GT. Get more power and performance at Cars Plus in Mighty during Dodge Performance Days. Cars Plus, driven by you.
Welcome back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, Guam's single voice of reason. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
So here we are back again. I'm going to launch into the card, but I'm just peeking at Facebook out of the corner of my eye and going back to the chat that Jesse and I just had about, once again, about the evils of the federal government running up the government of Guam's debt for frivolous purposes. And Nate horns in and says, tax refunds are the people's money, Jesse. So, when that evil federal court came along and told the government of Guam, you got to pay those tax refunds 6 months after April 15. This was just another situation where the federal government was being unfair to indigenous Chamorros and violating their human rights. A federal court. Let's see, I got somebody else. I got Francis on the line here. I'll take Francis and then I'll jump into the card. Good afternoon, Francis.
Yeah.
Hi, Francis.
Oh.
And Francis's dog, I think, right?
Yeah, he's trying to get to my 5 iguanas here.
Okay.
And I'm just trying to see if I can, maybe you can learn to live with them because they're from small to big, So. Anyway, that was Youngblood Jesse, the last caller.
Uh-huh.
Oh, my brother, my young brother Jesse. Man, that's just speechless here because he mentioned something about the United Nations, and he brought out something about independence. And Jesse, my brother, I love you. You need to know what's really going on in this world, because this issue sometimes is not going to cut mustard, because there's just so much that a lot of our young people need to learn, instead of just defending the political status, and they just need to jump into it and find out exactly what's really going on with this issue of political status. You know, I'm not against it. I just feel that there's a lot more that needs to be discovered, you know, other than just to defend one political status. There's just so much I wanted to say, you know. There's just so much. They talk about the United Nations. The first 5 years I was there, I didn't really know what was going on, but after a while I started to sense a lot of things. And that was a little scary. So I don't know if the reform from former President George Bush, you know, and the ambassador, and when they you know, Montana Maloney, when they voted to get the U.S. Out of the Human Rights Commission, that was one thing I will not forget. And that's why when people talk about the United Nations, I don't know if there's reform there, you know, I don't know, but it was very very corrupt and dysfunctional at the time we were there. I don't know what's the latest with the different ambassadors that were appointed and the Secretary General, you know, and his report to the General Assembly and all that, you know. But there was so much that I heard and felt when I was there, and it was just not good. You have these commissions, you know, I mean, from countries that have been abusing their own people, you know, and they were escaping all the scrutiny, the investigation, the observation, you know, from U.S. to avoid, you know, getting caught for their violations of human rights. I'm just trying to figure out what, you know, I hear people going to the UN. I hear the Lieutenant Governor made a remark with the Commission on Decolonization, and wait a minute. You know, I'm just a lot of things that I wanted to find out, and all we were asking for was just, can you please tell us where were you? Because United Nations, I don't know if there's you know, and before we get to the Lieutenant Governor, I know that the UN members there, they all have diplomatic immunity. But then again, I wanted to find out if the Lieutenant Governor, while he was there visiting, was he on the calendar or schedule? Was that the Social and Economic Commission, you know, that did not require for clearance, you know, Judge?
Uh-huh.
So I just wanted to find out where was he coming from, what organization or commission on the Social and Economic Commission was he coming from, and how was he able to make a remark to discourage the U.S. You know, or encourage the U.S. and to promote and support the decolonization efforts? And I just lost my mind. Can you balance this out for me a little bit?
Well, I'm going to get into the Lieutenant Governor's remarks before that committee later on in the program, Francis.
All right. Sounds good.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for calling, Francis. So, yeah. So, Jesse got the program off to a pretty good start. Jesse comes back and he says, you know, on the income tax, the EITC is a tax credit, not a refund, and that represents half of the tax returns. Yeah, so the The reason that this is important, again, this is something that the federal government has imposed upon us. Of course, they let us keep all the federal income tax that's paid here, but never mind. Okay, first thing on my agenda here, I haven't seen much of the Triple J Rangers lately, so I thought I'd better start talking about some of the downside risks of marijuana. I thought maybe if I did that, I'd smoke them out. Yeah, so I got an article here from the Post. The item on the card is called Marijuana versus Kids. And this is what the title of the article, Teen Pot Use on Rise. Easy access in legalized states pose health risks. And I'm going to go to something way down in the article here that I think is a dimension of the whole marijuana deal that makes it extremely difficult to deal with. 10 states in the District of Columbia, with Illinois posed to be next, show recreational marijuana use for adults, and 34 permit medical marijuana. Washington's commercial market posted a record $978 million in retail sales in fiscal 2018, data show, which meant $358 million in excise tax for state coffers. Colorado pot industry racked up even higher sales in calendar 2018, a record $1.54 billion, which brought in $266 million in marijuana taxes and fees. So, you know, once you start bringing in big money like that, even if you had huge numbers of people coming out and saying, we really made a mistake on marijuana, we did something that was wrong and we shouldn't have done it, you're not going to be able to stop because of the big money involved. The insidious big money. And of course, that was one of the selling points behind Clint's Cannabis Industry Act. Oh, it's, you know, rather than, I've introduced a bill here that will allow you to avoid punishment for using a drug that's going to make you feel really good. He didn't say that. I'm starting a new industry. It's going to provide employment opportunity for people, and it's also going to provide a lot of taxes for the government of Guam. Really, Clint? Wow, that's great. What are we going to do, build cars or raise sweet corn? Oh, no, it's just cannabis. Never mind that. It's just cannabis. But it's going to be a new industry and jobs and taxes and et cetera. So these two states here have gotten themselves into something now that will be very difficult, somewhere between very difficult and impossible to get out of should they want to. The article goes on to say, with some marijuana products averaging 68% THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, exponentially greater than the pot baby boomers once smoked. Calls to poison control centers and visits to emergency rooms have risen. In the Detroit, as you were in the Denver area, visits to Children's Hospital Colorado facilities for treatment of cyclic vomiting, paranoia, psychosis, and other acute cannabis-related symptoms jumped to 777 in 2015 from 161 in 2005. Horrible things are happening to kids, said psychiatrist Libby Stite, who treats teens in southwestern Colorado and has studied the health impacts of high-potency marijuana. I see increased problems with psychosis, with addiction, with suicide, with depression, and anxiety. Here's another interesting part of it. The brain is abnormally vulnerable during adolescence, said Stacy Gruber, an associate professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School, who studies how marijuana affects the brain. Policy seems to have outpaced science. And in the best of all popular worlds, science would allow us to set policy. And that was part of my rap here. My rap was, first of all, if marijuana has some medical benefits, let's take it off Schedule 1 so we can do some research with it and find out. And if it does, then we know how to deal with medicine. We've got a Food and Drug Administration, not a problem. The second part of my rap was that criminalization of drugs should be a matter of state law. Feds can get involved with interstate commerce in drugs, but not state law. It should be a matter for each of the states. The third thing, part of my rap, was that I don't see that we benefit at all, given our situation, by adding another mind-altering drug to the things that are available to folks who live here, especially when we could wash those states who've already jumped in and let them kind of be the laboratory and see how it worked for them. But for once, we had to be out in front of the parade. If you get out in front of the parade, you can pretend you're the leader, right, Real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir.
That's the Robert Underwood formulation. Yeah. Then later on, the article says, it seems like everyone is looking in the other way, and meanwhile, kids are ending up in hospitals. After a 20-year-old student's grades plummeted in the fall, his father enrolled him in a private treatment program costing thousands of dollars a month. The popularity of cannabis concentrates, which bear no resemblance to the plant from which they're derived, is linked to teens' burgeoning use of electronic cigarettes. According to school officials, some e-cigarette devices work with marijuana as well as nicotine. Unlike a burning joint, the vaped pot is odorless and smokeless. Now, there's quite a combination, being able to smoke marijuana in a vape instrument. First of all, the verdict is out on vaping to start with. You know, I've read that it causes things like popcorn lung. I really like popcorn, but I wouldn't want it in my lungs. So it's another one of these things that's brand new. It hasn't been around for very long. We don't know what the long-term effects of it are, but we don't care because we kind of like it, so we're going to jump in. So that makes for a dangerous combination. Yeah, so that's enough from this article. The point of the article is that marijuana is very deleterious effects for young folks. And you can say, well, yeah, but you got to be 21 to buy it. But, you know, everybody who's ever been a teenager knows that even if you got to be 21 to drink alcohol, to buy alcohol, that doesn't mean you're not going to drink alcohol when you're a teenager, right, Real Joe Cruz?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Kind of reminds me of back when the first time I ran for senator, I went to a student forum up at Simon Sanchez High School, and that's when we were just trying to decide whether to pass a law to change the drinking age from 18 to 21. It was 18, and there was a move to change it to 21. And all of the other senatorial candidates, you know, when they addressed that question in front of a bunch of junior high kids, oh, no, I wouldn't want to do that, you know, no. And when it was my turn, I said, yeah, I want to do that. And this sharp young junior high kid said, why? And I said, because I was 18 once myself. Not a peep out of anybody. They knew exactly what I meant. So I feel the same way. You know, when you're talking about drugs and things like that we don't have a lot of experience with, the dangers can be great. Now, if you're an old, crusty adult like I am and you want to give it a shot, I guess my libertarian instincts come out. But when we're talking about kids, I think we have some kind of a responsibility to look out for the kids and try to, yeah, right. That's a good good note for me to quit on. Thanks for that round of applause.
Discover a new galaxy. GTA introduces the new Samsung Galaxy S10 in 3 different sizes. The Galaxy S10 comes with cool new features like Power Share that allows you the ability to share your battery power with other devices. Or you can capture a wider world with its new camera featuring an ultra-wide lens for when you need to take pictures of the whole family. And with GTA handset payment option, you can take home a Galaxy S10 for $0 down. GTA, we start with you.
Okay, so coming back here, we got just 9 more minutes to that big halftime show that we do every day at 1700, 5 o'clock, the marching bands, the drill teams, the cheerleaders, the fire eaters, the sword swallowers, the synchronized card sections. It's a great show, and it's wound up with a barrage of cannon fire that'll just lift you right up off your chair. Okay, next item on the card here is Governor Lou Leon. I shouldn't, excuse me for my familiarity here. Governor Lou Leon Guerrero, the first female elected governor of Guam, versus transparency. And all 4 of the media covered it. I liked the way the Post, as you were, PNC covered it. They said, legislature defies governor on tainted water bill. Adelup Republican caucus criticized delay and lack of urgency. So before I jump into that, I've got a couple of limericks here. You'll recall that the governor announced on Friday that she was calling the legislature into special session on Monday at 10 o'clock. And it took a little while to find out what the reason for the special session was, but it finally came out that it was to deal with the tainted water bill. So everybody was anxiously awaiting the 10 o'clock special session. But then it was announced the 10 o'clock special session was canceled, and another special session was called at 2 o'clock, causing people to wonder, well, what happened? Were we, if we're going to do it at 10, why not do it at 10? Well, as usual, the limerick master of tall tales has the answer here for us. He says, when calling the legislative roster, no one was found for a bill to foster. For their great hunger, they sought a fishmonger and headed straight to the new Red Lobster. So yesterday was the opening of Red Lobster down in Tumon. Andrew also said a special session was called, but senators whined and bawled. I'll be a big wimp if I miss out on the shrimp. Stay here and work? I'm appalled. So instead of staying there and doing their work, they went to the Red Lobster, causing Andrew to say, is that fresh seafood we smell? We've got hunger to quell. Stay here and work, they said with a smirk as they drove like a bat out of hell. And finally, Andrew said, 10 a.m., no need to putter. It's too early to deal with this clutter. We'd like to dine on some seafood and wine. Would someone please pass the butter? I got a couple more here. Andrew says that when the topic is right, the limericks write themselves. So the rumor was that the reason that they canceled the 10 o'clock session was everybody wanted to go to the Red Lobster for lunch. You can have special session at any time, but you can't always go to the grand opening of the Red Lobster. Hold on while I preen and primp. This is certainly no time to skimp. I know I'm on duty, but can't pass free booty. I'll have cheese, biscuits, and shrimp. And then finally, a special session? How drab. We don't need 4 hours to gab. Why wait in line on seafood to dine? I'll have scallops and crab. Yeah, well, 3 cheers for Andrew there, Real Joe Cruz. Andrew is the poet laureate of Tall Tales, a well-deserved title. So then I go to Lou versus Transparency. So after they came back from lunch at Red Lobster, the session was called to order, and the speaker announced that she had certified, in accordance with the standing rules, that an emergency existed. Therefore, debate could proceed on the bill without the necessity of a public hearing. But Senator Nelson stood up and moved for recess until, let's see, the 9th of July, I believe. Well, a motion to recess or a motion to adjourn is not debatable. You just vote on it. And when the votes were counted, 8 people voted for it, 6 people voted against it. So the legislature stood in recess. I thought this was, without going into the merits of the bill, I see this as kind of really good news, and I think it's time for us to tip our hats to Ken Leon Guerrero and to Andre Bainum. Yeah, you guys go ahead and take a victory lap, Andre and Ken, because you'll recall on the 21st of November in 2014, the legislature was called into special session by acting Governor Ray Tenorio, who sent a bill to the legislature that gave everybody and his brother a substantial raise and made it retroactive almost 2 years. The bill passed in less than an hour, was zipped back to acting Governor Ray Tenorio, who signed it the same day. So credit for what Andre later on called the great salary smash and grab went to the Wonpat 10, 9 senators led by Speaker Judy Wonpat, and by acting Governor Ray Tenorio. And a lot of fuss was created, and it lasted for a long time. It lasted up until the next election, and at least 6 senators were shown the door. 6 members of the Wonpat 10 lost their seats, including Speaker Wonpat herself. So if I were to read between the lines on what happened yesterday, read that through the lens of November 21, 2014, I have the feeling that senators are saying to themselves, I'm not going to touch moving forward without a public hearing. I'm not going to touch that with somebody else's 10-foot pole. Too dangerous. Well, we'll come back to this after the big halftime show.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
A review and a record for Mayor Pete. I'm Jessica Stone, Fox News. The city of South Bend, Indiana, launching a review of its police department's use of force after the fatal shooting of a black man by a white officer. The announcement coming as city mayor and 2020 hopeful Pete Buttigieg raises a massive $24.8 million in the second quarter of 2019.
Continuing to talk about our vision for the country, our work in the city, and how the two are related in the same way that a president has to do an awful lot of things at once. A presidential candidate and certainly a mayor running for president has to do that. The message we're looking forward to sharing over the course of this week will add more elements on how our proposals are really going to affect people's lives.
Buttigieg cut his campaigning short last month to return to South Bend and address that shooting. Iran's top diplomat tweeting frustration at the White House. Mohammad Javad Zarif wrote, quote, "Seriously?" after the administration accused Iran of violating the nuclear deal before it even existed. The president making history in North Korea, but not everyone is happy about it. Fox's Kristen Fisher has more from the White House.
It was a moment that surprised even North Korean leader Kim Jong-un.
I've never expected to meet you at this place.
President Trump crossing over the demilitarized zone and into the history books.
It was an honor that you asked me to step over that line, and I was proud to step over the line.
The step was praised by the Pope as a move towards peace, but blasted by the president's 2020 rivals as elevating a dictator without getting any hard concessions in return. The president says nuclear talks will now resume in 2 to 3 weeks, with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo leading the negotiating team. The New York Times is reporting the U.S. may settle for a nuclear freeze, effectively accepting North Korea as a nuclear country, something President Trump has said in the past would never fly.
National Security Advisor John Bolton pushing back on that New York Times report. This is Fox News.
Business travel just got easier. Take your data plan with you for only $10 a day to all 17 Data to Go destinations. Never worry about additional data roaming charges when you go where your business needs you. The US, China, Thailand, and so much more. Have the assurance you need to check emails, surf the web, and stay connected. Call 688-2677 today to make sure your account is Data to Go ready. Docomo Pacific. Better together.
We know too well the inconvenience of not having power after a storm. You worry about food in the freezer going bad. Nights get hot. It's hard finding comfort when going to sleep. These are realities. But with solar and battery storage from Micronesia Renewable Energy, these realities can be a thing of the past. The solar works during the day and the batteries power your home at night. Call 632-2613 to see how solar plus battery storage can make life a little more convenient. MRE, the smarter choice.
Major League Baseball is mourning the death of one of their own. Fox's Ryan Mayer has that story.
Tragedy struck the baseball world Monday as Los Angeles Angels pitcher Tyler Skaggs was found dead in his hotel room in Texas. A first-round draft pick of the Angels in the 2009 draft, Skaggs had spent his entire career with the organization. The team released a statement saying, quote, "Tyler has and always will be an important part of the Angels family. Our thoughts and prayers are with his wife, Carly, and his entire family during this devastating time." Southlake, Texas Police Department officials said in a statement that no foul play is suspected and the investigation is ongoing. Ryan Mayer, Fox News.
Elbows proving sharper than words for the new White House spokeswoman, Stephanie Grisham, throwing her body into the chaos of cameras at the DMZ over the weekend to make sure the U.S. press got the historic shot of President Trump stepping into North Korea. At a Walmart store in Texas, you can have your cake and eat it too, but you're going to have to pay for it. Fox's John Saucier has more.
Police called into the Walmart in Wichita Falls, Texas, where they encountered a woman who didn't want to pay for a full cake. She was at the register with a half-eaten cake and says she found it that way. Well, the store manager was the one who called the police and said this lady was walking around the store eating the cake, and by the time she got up to the register, she had already consumed half of it. She wasn't charged, but was ordered to pay the full price and is now banned from the store. Back in January, another woman was banned from a different Walmart in the same town. She was allegedly driving a motorized shopping cart around the store parking lot and drinking wine out of a Pringles can. John Saucier, Fox News.
And a piece of the princess is now on the auction block. The baggy Virgin Atlantic sweatshirt worn by Princess Diana, expected to fetch more than $5,000. It's being sold by Diana's longtime personal trainer. I'm Jessica Stone. This is Fox News.
This is Ronnie. Ronnie is about to break his piggy bank.
Come on, piggy bank.
Ronnie wants to upgrade his smartphone.
And this piggy's gonna help me.
If Ronnie had signed up for GTA's handset payment option, he could have selected a new smartphone with an affordable monthly plan.
I could have what?
Exactly. Sign up for HBO at GTA and don't break the bank.
I'm sorry, Piggy Bank.
Terms and conditions apply. GTA, we start with you.
The sky's the limit with Bank Pacific's secure MyCloud banking. You can access your account 24/7 with your smartphone, your computer, your iPad, or any other tablet. You can pay bills, set up alerts, check your balances, wire transfer money. It's never been easier. Enroll online or come on in and see one of our friendly staff. Digital Life, Digital Solutions. Bank Pacific.
Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender, member FDIC. Viva Bank Pacific.
So there you have it, the big halftime show that we have every day at 5 o'clock, 1700. Very enjoyable. I especially like the cannon fire at the end of the show. So I'm going to pick up where I left off here. This is Governor Lulian Guerrero versus Transparency. And I'm encouraged by the fact that 8 senators are saying we're not going to go forward with this on this certificate of emergency here so that we can pass this bill without a public hearing. We saw what happened the last time this happened. So, again, I take my hat off to Ken and Andre. I think there a lot of training went into the process, and I think that at least this legislature understands that people think that a public hearing is extremely important and it should not be waived or done away with or ignored for insufficient reasoning. So this article has makes some pretty interesting points, so I'm going to go through and pluck out the interesting points. The bill, which was earlier scheduled to be heard at 10 Monday morning, seeks to protect the waters of Guam by authorizing the acquisition of specialized legal services to assist in legal actions against the manufacture and use of perfluorinated chemicals, a group of more than 4,000 compounds collectively known as PFAS. So I'm just going to call them PFAS. 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 It's a little too hard. Maybe I'll just call them PFs. Yeah, that's what I'll do, PFs. Many states and towns in the mainland have been taking legal action against the maker of PFs for their roles in a nationwide drinking water contamination crisis. The lawsuit claims that the polluted water is the result of the manufacture and use of PFs. Reacting to the delay on her bill, the governor said the legislature's lack of urgency on the issue of PFAS is concerning because other jurisdictions have already begun the process of suing those responsible for the harm caused in their cities and states by PFAS contamination. So the special session is all about suing, using the courts. We will continue to work closely with the Attorney General to seek options that will preserve our claims. Every delay on this effort threatens our ability to join the ongoing multi-district litigation, which is our best means of bringing justice to the people, the governor said in a statement. She added, The Protehi Ihanum Act of 2019 is intended to equip the Attorney General, who serves as the government's chief legal officer, with the tools necessary to ensure that our interests are represented and our position advocated for any litigation filed on our behalf. We thank Speaker Barnes, Senator Terlahi, that's Senator Pedo Terlahi, and the Republican caucus for recognizing so clearly the urgency with which we must move on this issue. In an earlier letter to Speaker Barnes, the governor emphasized that time was of the essence in authorizing the specialized legal service because the window of opportunity is even smaller than initially believed. According to the governor, AdLoop has further refined and edited its proposed bill, formerly Bill 1S, not Bill 1 and now Bill 2, by taking inputs from Senator Charlize Terlahi, who chairs the Legislative Committee on Health, who, by the way, is a lawyer, and Attorney General Levin Camacho. The Attorney General has already issued a brief statement on the matter. The Office of the Attorney General is committed to take legal action when necessary to protect Guam's natural resources. I concur with the governor that prompt action is needed to identify legal experts and file suit to protect Guam's water and residents from harmful effects of PFs. Well, as I understand it, there isn't much protection going on here. The suit will be for monetary damages, but the story has not completely unfolded yet. According to the governor, the federal government knows that these chemicals have been used excessively at their military bases on Guam. So there we go again, right? The military bases. Yeah. Jesse, are you listening? The military, the federal government, military bases. Yeah. Just chumming the water a little bit there. There is no doubt that their use has detrimentally affected our island's water sources. We must educate ourselves on the extent of damage caused by these said chemicals and identify those responsible, the governor said. The governor also argued that the emergency nature of the situation justifies the lack of public hearing on the proposed bill. Well, I have an interesting question. How much of an emergency is this going to be when we find out that at least some people in authority knew about this in February? So what's going on is that there is a class action where several different forms of government, I don't think any of them are states, I think they're all municipalities, have brought suit against DuPont and what's another big chemical company?
3M?
3M, yeah. It's a case of products liability. And in order to prevail on that, it would have to be shown that these chemicals are dangerous and that the manufacturer knew that they were dangerous when he put them into the stream of commerce. Not an easy case to make, but not impossible. And I just want to stop here and reflect for a minute. So many of the things that we think are really innovations turn out to be such not good deals later on. If I could have your leave to go back to my childhood for a minute, Real Joe Cruz. When I was a youngster growing up in Wisconsin, we had terrible mosquito problems in Wisconsin. You don't know mosquitoes until you've been to Wisconsin in the summertime. So the city that I lived in did what was called fogging. So there was a Jeep that had this pump on the back that pumped DDT vapor into the air. It was like vaping on a very large scale. These huge clouds of like white steam would float into the air, and of course they'd kill the mosquitoes. And the kids loved them. When that fogger come around, we'd all run behind the fogger and hide in the fog. And it was just so much fun. And we all did it. And of course, our parents told, don't do that, don't do that. Of course, we did it anyhow. And I suppose maybe that's what's wrong. Maybe I inhaled too much of that fog, huh? I'm just kidding, Real Joe Cruz. Yeah, so that was, and then later on we come along with Rachel Carson and Silent Spring, and we find out that maybe DDT isn't such a good deal after all. And another example, if you went to the shoe store in my hometown, they had an X-ray machine in the shoe store. And it was sort of like a jukebox that you could stick your foot into. And you stick your foot into it and turn it on, and you could see the X-ray of your foot on the screen. And that way you could tell whether or not you had a good fit or not. Kids loved it. So, of course, when your mom or dad would take you to buy shoes, you'd X-ray your foot, but you'd sneak in there any time you could just to stick your foot in that X-ray machine. Wow, this is so cool. Well, you won't find those machines in stores anymore. And I don't know how many millions of bucks somebody had to pay for that, because we know that excess exposure to X-ray causes cancer. We didn't know it at the time. So this kind of brings us back to vaping. You know, vaping seems like it's so cool. You know, as I'm driving down and walking beside the road, I see trucks go by and these huge clouds of steam come out of the truck. And there's somebody in there vaping. It looks like it must be a lot of fun to be able to exhale those huge clouds. But it could be that the vaping is going to be the PFs of the next decade or something like that. So anyhow, that's where we are with these PFs. At the time that they were first put out, they were thought to be, you know, just another chemical miracle. You know, the chemists, the big chemical companies were coming up with all these miracle chemicals like a Teflon pan, Real Joe Cruz. No matter how badly you screwed up your fried egg in the frying pan, it wouldn't stick to the pan, right?
It slides right off.
Slides right off. And all these other things that we thought were so great, maybe over the long run turned out to be not so great. And I think that's where we are with these PFs. I remember it's probably 2, 3, 4 years ago when there were stories in the paper about using a foam on the runways at our airports here as a fire retardant. So if there were a fire on the runway, you'd spray this stuff on the runway. And it was really good at putting out fires. But here we go again. So that's what the litigation is all about. But what would happen if it turned out that this was not a surprise? It just fell in the governor's lap on Friday. But if people who were in responsible positions knew about it back as long ago as February and didn't take the appropriate action, and now are saying, oh, we got to do it right away, giving new life to the old saying, your lack of preparedness doesn't constitute my emergency. But anyhow, back into this article here. The governor argued that the, quote, emergency nature of the situation justifies the lack of public hearing on the proposed bill. But the legislature voted 8-6 with one excused absence in favor of taking up the governor's bill at a later date. Later, in an interview on K57, Senator Therese Terlahi said the governor's bill was already scheduled earlier for a public hearing under the Legislative Committee on Environment, chaired by Senator Sabina Paris. She added that August 4 is the deadline to add parties to existing class lawsuits against PFs manufacturers, so there is ample time for a public hearing to be conducted on the governor's bill. It's always good to have more information, Terlahi said. Senator Amanda Shelton echoed, saying public input is a valuable part of democracy, the D word. Clean water is vitally important for all our families, but the will of the people is not served by leaving out their voices in the process. It's not enough to do right. Leaders must do it in the right way. Yeah, how do I phrase that? You must not only do the right thing, but you must do things right, real Joe Cruz. The public hearing for the governor's bill has been slated for Tuesday, July 9 at 8 a.m. in the Guam Congress building. Now, this will be an opportunity for the nationalists to come down and do a little Zori pounding, talking about the evil military and how they've polluted our waters. And why aren't we suing the military? It's going back to the editorial or the story, it's a complete reversal of voting along party lines. Republican Senators Castro, Taitigui, Munya, and Moylan voted against delaying public discussion on the bill sent down by the governor. According to the Republican senators, they agree with the governor's statement that the window of opportunity to assert our position is small and requires swift, decisive action. So are we seeing the Republicans finally starting to act like Republicans after all these months? It could be. It could be that the Republicans have figured out that unless they want to always stay in the minority, they have to be able to contrast themselves with the Democrats. And perhaps that's what they're finally doing. Here's a quote. Immediate legal action led by Guam's Attorney General is needed in order to mitigate further harm, pursue justice and compensation for damages caused by the environment and our people. It's good to always talk in terms of our people. We agree on the need for legal action. What is needed is a healthy, open, and well-informed debate on the bill in the committee of the whole. A statement from the Republican caucus stated. So they're saying, no, we'll just resolve into the committee of the whole. We don't need no stinking public hearing. The Republican senators say they agree with the stands of the Leon Guerrero Tenorio administration. Speaker Barnes and Pito Terlahi that the government of Guam must take immediate action before any further harm is caused on the people. According to the GFT, an indefinite recess from the session does nothing to further the discussion of this important matter. Had the bill been placed for discussion on the session floor, the Republican senators said they would have requested that the legislature go into the committee of the whole and bring in subject matter experts as well as representatives from GEPA, DPHSS, GWA, ADLOOP, the Attorney General's Office, the Boy Scouts, Chuck E. Cheese, and other pertinent agencies. The Republican caucus is of the position that the lawsuit will reveal the extent to which toxic fluorinated compounds known as PFAS have over the past 40 years impacted our community. Such related chemicals have been lately linked to birth defects, increased risk of thyroid disease, infertility, and reduced immune responses in children. If litigation is the most effective route to holding people accountable for these atrocities and recovering millions of dollars to prevent further harm for future generations or pay for damages done, then I ask my colleagues to move swiftly in support of the bill, says Senator Will Castro. Now, atrocities. You know, we have a case of verbal inflation at the legislature. Atrocity. You got to do a whole lot more than inadvertently put bad stuff in the water before it's an atrocity. You got to deliberately do it with the intent of killing people. Then maybe you can talk atrocity. But, of course, it is the legislature. If any of this is upheld in a court of law, then countless Guam residents may have unknowingly been the victims of an atrocity committed upon our people. So Munya likes the word atrocity also. An atrocity committed upon our people. So a little bit more of the old victim-villain type grievance politics. We don't know what happened, but by gosh, we've got a grievance here. Unfortunately, there's evidence of cancer-causing substances in our GWA water wells, which may be attributed to the firefighting foam used at military and civilian airport facilities. The special session today was meant to address the urgency of obtaining legal services necessary to represent the people of Guam at a time when at least 10 other affected communities have filed suit. Every day lost because some senators fail to understand the urgency of acting in a timely manner means families continue to drink, take a bath, wash dishes, and care for their children with water that's contaminated with significant levels of cancer-causing chemicals. Senators need to act now! Exclamation point, says Senator Tello Taitigui, the minority whip. So if you pass this bill today, Senator, and the governor signs it today, and the Attorney General's got the go-ahead, you'll be able to hire a lawyer. And this, as if by magic, will change the water that comes out of the tap. Another quote, this is from James C. Moylan, the Assistant Minority Whip. If local authorities aren't reporting these chemicals in annual reports, but a lawsuit supported by supplemental scientific data proves otherwise, then let's get to the bottom of this quickly before any more harm is done. We should not delay to get to the truth and call for immediate corrective action. Well, as luck would have it, I was listening to the Ray Gibson show this morning, part of my daily routine that I would recommend to every single one of the members of our international radio listening audience out there. And Simon Sanchez and Ray were talking about this. Simon Sanchez is on the CCU board, and he said that it was just a few years ago that it was found out that the EPA determined that there was a problem with the PFs. And he said when it was made known to them, they tested their wells, and they had to shut down 3 of the wells because of PFs. So I understand the principle of demagoguery. And sometimes people think that if you're a senator, that's your job, to be a demagogue. Toss around words like atrocities and poisoning our people and things like that. When all this bill is doing is talking about authorizing money to hire a lawyer to file suit. And I can tell you from personal experience, filing suit doesn't really change much of anything in the real world until the suit is over. But anyhow, there was ample opportunity after the lunch at the Red Lobster, ample opportunity for some really high-powered virtue signaling. And senators got a chance to come forward with some very pithy quotations in their statements. So I suppose that's what we can expect from our elected body. So our Carl wants to comment on this. Put our Carl on right up until the 7th inning stretch, our Carl.
Yeah, hi, Bob. Good afternoon. I find it very interesting how everything's a crisis these days. There's a tree crisis, and now there's this water crisis, and, it's crisis after crisis. And it just brings to mind that famous saying by that Democrat member of the Obama administration, Rahm Emanuel.
Right.
Never let a good crisis go to waste.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's. If you can hop on it and milk it, it's worth a lot of political capital. before it dies out, and people discover, well, this was kind of overblown a little bit, One thing I'm disappointed
Carl,
about is
Carl,
that
Carl, are you looking for the phrase blown out of proportion?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And it's I lost my train of thought. But anyway, I just find it ironic that the Republicans are failing to act as an alternative to the Democrats. If they don't do that, if they don't differentiate themselves and just go along on the Me Too train, I don't know how this is going to go. I think you were right that they're going to end up being stuck in minority status for quite a long time, which may not be a bad thing because there's lower expectations when you're in minority status. So maybe they kind of gotten comfortable in that status. But I look for politicians that are going to provide an alternative. I don't look for Democrat light that provide a real alternative as far as how issues are approached. And too many times I'm just not seeing it. The last election, I only voted for 5 senators, all Republican.
I think Daryl Taggarty described it pretty well. He said the legislature, to operate properly, must be like a scissors, 2 sharp blades acting against one another. And I think that's right.
Yeah, when I get very uncomfortable when everybody's high-fiving each other and marching merrily over the cliff. It makes me very uncomfortable. I like to see people battling it out, and debating things and doing the hard work. That's why we elected them, is to provide 2 alternatives and hash it out in session and argue and debate and arrive at some kind of agreement, maybe. And if not, we'll just maybe the bill is just a lousy bill and deserves to be to go down. President Calvin Coolidge said that the main job of legislatures, the most important job, is destroying bad legislation or ending bad legislation. It's not passing good legislation. That's secondary. If they would stick to just killing bad legislation, they would do a tremendous amount of good for the island.
True enough, Carl. So I think the good news out of what happened, I guess 3 items of good news. Good business for Red Lobster, number 1. Number 2, the legislature, at least 8 of them, finally understand don't horse around with this whole public hearing mechanism. And 3, that the minority, the Republicans, are finally starting to act like Republicans are like the minority and taking a position that's contra to the Democrats without getting into the substance of the matter, which is the PFs, the litigation, and all the rest of that, which is a little bit more complicated than tossing the word atrocity around freely, as a couple of the Republicans did, for effect, I suppose.
Yeah, I kind of hope and would expect them to be the voice of reason and the voice of trying to provide an alternative to overspending, rampant spending of the public money, and provide an alternative in that way. And when they don't do that, it's just very disappointing.
Yeah.
Hopefully I can vote for more than 5 the next time. But sometimes it's not looking that great.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. So once again, if the Republicans continue to act like Republicans, there may actually be a contest in the next election rather than trying to decide which female Democrats we're going to vote for or not vote for.
Yeah, and that swings the other way too. I mean, I voted for Michael St. Nicholas, and he's a Democrat because I just liked his spine. He just was a contrarian, and he took a position, and he took heat, and he didn't back down. And I respected that, despite the fact that I tend to vote strongly Republican, and I voted for him. And so far, I don't really have any major regrets. I think he's shown some spine, in getting some things done and just pressing on despite criticisms and, the stuff that gets thrown at you when you're unconventional and doing things in against maybe the established way of doing things.
Hey, there I go, Carl.
All right, Bob.
Thanks for calling, Carl.
It's great talking with you on the great show.
All righty. Short break, and we'll be right back to Independence Lou versus the United States.
Building a business is tough work. Big or small, Nanbo Insurance has your business covered. Nanbo takes the guesswork out of coverage to protect your investments. Over the years, Nanbo has worked with businesses of all sizes, from large hotels to small businesses. Nanbo Insurance will be your best asset. With Nanbo, you can also save big when you bundle up and insure your car, home, motorcycle, or business. Enjoy great savings, up to 50%. Visit nanbo.com or call 477-9754 for more details.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Nobody wants to hear the next extra point. Nobody wants to be reminded of the pain. I'm Jerry Robertson. At 7:20 a.m. on The Ray Gibson Show, we're going to talk about rejection. Oh, I'm not sure I'll be able to handle it myself.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Seventh inning stretch. Center field bleachers, Wrigley Field. Means we got just 2 more innings to go here on Tall Tales. And I'm going to launch into Separatist Lou versus the United States. And you recall yesterday I had a list of vocabulary words that are necessary to understand Lou's position, at least the way I see it. The first word on the list is Gwexit. We're all familiar with Brexit, which means Britain exiting from the European Union. Gwexit means Guam exiting from the American Empire to become an independent country. Gwexit. And then next on my list is Chimocracy. The syllable cracy, C-R-A-C-Y, means government by. So a democracy is government by the people, kleptocracy, government by thieves, so on, meritocracy, government by merit. And then we have Chimocracy, which means government by Chamorros, government of Chamorros, by Chamorros, for Chamorros. And that's, until somebody tells me differently, that's what I see as the result of Gwexit. Guam leaving the United States, the American Empire, and becoming an independent country. And then we have Quisling, which is a term that goes back to the World War II leader of Norway, who collaborated with the occupying Germans. So many of our staunch nationalists here on the island, those who are in favor of Gwexit, actually are Quislings, because they're working for the colonizers' government, the government of Guam, set up by a statute enacted by the colonizers' Congress and a government created by the colonizer, which seems to be okay. Then I've got C cubed, which describes the 3 words that one must use in any discussion in favor of Gwexit. That would be Chamorro, culture, colonize. You have to use those. You should use those 3 words at least in every other sentence. Pieds-Noirs, which comes from the French and is a term that was used to describe people of French extraction who had settled in Algeria. There were over 1 million of them. When Algerian independence came, they had to all go back to France very, very quickly. And then finally, I've got CSRG, the Chamorro Socialist Republic of Guahan, which I think would be the result of Gwexis, that an independent Guam would become the Socialist Republic, the Chamorro Socialist Republic of Guahan. And what caused me to be thinking about all these things was something that our governor said at that big meeting that she had with all the activists. And she said that, well, you know, I would really like to go along with the environmental and cultural positions that you want me to take, but I can't because I'm just the governor of an unincorporated territory. I don't have much bargaining position. And I've described that before in terms of mom and dad, right? Real Joe Cruz. So that's kind of her cover. I'm with you guys. I'm really with you. I'm doing as much as I can, but I can't do much because I'm just the governor of an unincorporated territory. Not mentioning that the situation wouldn't be any different if we were in a state and she were the governor of a state. But she follows that up with this. We get our political status in order and we vote on what we want to be so we can have more control over our destiny here, and so we can have more control over our lands. So we can go to the United Nations and negotiate with the United States. And so we can be at the table when these kinds of things are being negotiated. That can mean only one thing: Gwexit, an independent Guam. States don't sit down at the table and negotiate with the national government. States don't go to the United Nations. So that's what Lou is saying. She wants an independent Guam. What did I call it? The CSRG could then go to the United Nations and negotiate, have a seat at the table. And I'm sure that we could send very effective negotiators, assuming that this would happen at the United Nations, which really isn't the way the United Nations works, but that doesn't seem to be a bar to those who would invoke the name of the United Nations. Knowing how it actually works is not a condition to precede to talking about the wonders of the United Nations. So we can go to the United Nations and negotiate with the United States so we can be at the table when these things are being negotiated. That's what our governor wants. So in this era of openness, you know, we have the first openly homosexual lieutenant governor. We have the first openly pro-abortion governor. And now we have the first openly pro-independence governor of Guam. So, Jesse, you ought to see that as really good news, that the governor wants independence. You two have a lot in common. So to add a little frosting to the cake here, I've got the story of our lieutenant governor going to the, what was the name? The UN Special Committee on Decolonization. And Tenorio said, I encourage the special committee and member states to retain the pressure on the administrating power to decolonize Guam. Now, he starts right out saying something that isn't correct, because there isn't anybody in the government here, in his government, that cares a lick about decolonizing Guam. That's not what it's about. The so-called Commission on Chamorro, as you were on decolonization, is really the Commission for Chamorro Independence. The commission is not talking about decolonizing the island of Guam or the government of Guam, or anything else. It's talking about self-determination for the Chamorro people. That is not decolonization. It's something different. But nobody really wants to get down to that. It's so much more politically correct to talk about decolonization because we've made the word colony, colonizer, colonization into pejoratives, kind of the equivalent of the N word, but it starts with a C. So he starts out by saying something that's really inaccurate. Put pressure on the administrating power to decolonize Guam, which isn't really what he's talking about. And then the article says, the U.S. is Guam's administering power in matters of self-determination. Tenorio said Guam's aspirations for self-determination and true self-government will remain until a process of decolonization is completed. And what his administration means by that is when Guam is independent. 32 years ago, he said, Guam voters democratically called on the administrating power to recognize the right of its native inhabitants, the Chamorro people of Guam, to decolonize their homeland. I don't remember that. 32 years ago, that would have been, 30 years ago, 1980. That would have been back in the days when we were talking about Commonwealth. I don't remember the whole Commonwealth initiative being about Guam voters democratically called on the administrating power to recognize the right of its native inhabitants, the Chamorro people of Guam, to decolonize their homeland. This process came to an end when the administrating power failed to act on our proposal for a constructive path toward a sovereign status for Guam. That was the Commonwealth Bill. That would be worth a whole program just to talking about how we handled our end of the Commonwealth Bill and why it didn't go anywhere and why it really wasn't, quote, decolonization. It was just more unincorporated territory, kind of following the path that I think we should follow. We should make the most of our unincorporated territory status and our position in the American Empire rather than trying to establish the Chamorro Socialist Republic of Guam. When the administrating power failed to act, Tenorio said, we embarked on a decolonization process of our own. No. By establishing a process to allow the native inhabitants of Guam to express their preference for political status. Tenorio referred to the non-binding plebiscite on Guam's political status, which Judge Francis Tydinko Gatewood, and by the way, Francis Tydinko Gatewood is Chamorro. This is pretty important. It's not, but struck down on March 2017, saying that allowing only island's native inhabitants to vote for Guam's future political status is a race-based discrimination. No, it's not race-based. It's about Chamorros, which makes it okay. As the committee may be aware, Tenorio said, this process has now been halted by the courts of the administering power, whose legal processes are actively preventing our government's ability to follow through on this mandate. Our legal processes aren't doing anything. Somebody brought suit. Dave Davis brought suit. So you're trying to hang this, hang it on the courts and the legal processes. Again, this is disingenuous. The only course proposed by the administering power to date is the status quo, which is not the desire of Guam. I haven't even heard that. I haven't heard anybody in authority in the national government saying what we think is the ultimate political status for Guam is just to stay the way it is. Haven't heard that. Okay, 10-minute break. 10 minutes to go. Okay.
Get a half gallon of Minute Maid orange juice for only $1.99 when you fuel up on $35 or more of premium high-performance fuel. Conditions apply. See stores for details. Circle K. Take it easy. Get a half gallon of Dairy Gold milk for only $1.99 when you fuel up on $35 or more of premium high-performance fuel. Conditions apply. See stores for details. Circle K. Take it easy. Get a $7 meal for only $1.99 when you fuel up on $35 or more of premium high-performance fuel. Conditions apply. See stores for details. Circle K. Take it easy.
Home stretch. Call to the post at Churchill Downs, Lexington, Kentucky. That means I got about 8 minutes to go here. I want to make a couple comments on the Facebook board, Jack, and then I'll get to you. Pierre, who I suspected would have a pretty good handle on the Pinois, says this. The Pinois were of European stock. Many Italians, Maltese, Spaniards, and French. 1.6 million left in 1962. So in other words, in 1962, when Algeria became an independent, 1.6 million people who didn't happen to be Algerian packed up and left Algeria, most of them on rather short notice. And when we're talking Gwexit, I haven't heard anybody talk about the local equivalents of Pinois. When we have the independent Guam, what do we do with those poor unfortunates who weren't born tomorrow? Okay. Another one here. Pierre also points out that the members of this committee that the lieutenant governor gave his impassioned speech to are China, Russia, Venezuela, Mozambique, Iraq, and Iran. So, you got a much better chance of getting a fair shake from that cast of characters than you ever could from the United States, Jesse. Okay, so let's see what Jack has to say today. Hello, Jack.
Hey, good afternoon, Bob. How you doing?
Good.
I just wanted to pick your brain here a little bit.
Well, it won't take you long, Jack. There's not much there to pick.
Well, anyways, let's just say, for instance, I was Governor Guam, right? And I came to you, and I have this thing. I need to get cash real fast, and I want to offload. I want to privatize one of our government entities. And I say, Bob, I need you to put together a contract. I need you to get me the best dollar. And then you say, okay, Governor, what is it that you want? What is it that you want to privatize? And I tell you, I want to privatize UOG. Right off your mind, how much money can I get?
You're asking me how much money I could
get for privatizing UOG.
How much I could sell it for, or?
Yeah. Well, to privatize it. Like Cornell is a land grant institution that's privatized. MIT is a land grant institution that's privatized.
Yeah.
So how much do you think? Yeah.
I don't quite understand the question. So I would be looking for a company to buy UOG and run it?
Well, I'm just asking. I want to privatize UOG.
Yeah.
So how much you think that I can get for privatizing UOG?
Well, it would depend on how you went about privatizing it, Jack. How are you going to privatize it?
Oh, maybe offer it up to maybe one of these other colleges or universities that could use it as a satellite school. I know we had a satellite school out here a while back, maybe a few decades ago. That's one way. You could offer it up like that. I know there's a lot of corporations out there with research markets that might be interested. and a land-grant institution.
Hmm.
So I'm just figuring, I just want to privatize it. How much do you think I could get for it?
I don't think I could get anything for it at all because I don't think there's any market for universities, Jack.
Yeah, I think there are, especially when the big real estate thing is location, location, location. And right now, because the way the federal government finances higher education, there's a lot of money in institutions now that are in higher education.
Well, there are a lot of non-governmental, privately owned institutions of higher learning. Some of them make a profit. Some of them are racked with scandal. So if you're talking about if you're talking about selling the university to some outfit like Webster College or one of those, I have a feeling that we couldn't get very much for it, Jack, because it's too asset intensive. Anyone who wanted to just buy the university at the book value of all the assets would have to have a tremendous amount of capital and be very difficult to get a decent return on that investment.
Well, that's the whole research and marketing end of this higher institution of learning nowadays. I mean, they're tailored towards that research and improving industries and things like that. What I'm trying to say is that the current state of affairs, especially now, and you look at the market for higher education, how much parents spend on the average, and how much the federal government spends on the average. I mean, it's not too far-fetched to try to see we could link up or at least get somebody involved in buying this higher institution of learning even as a tax write-off for some big corporation. We don't know. I'm just putting the idea out there. I mean, the only people that will complain are those who are afflicted with affluenza. Other than that, I think it's a win-win proposition here. Even when it comes to other things such as sporting events or anything that has to do with tourism or anything that has to do with research, marine lab, anything that has to do with agriculture, anything that has to do with even deep sea mining, anything, I'm quite sure we could package a deal that could probably put UOG, up there, and I'm just trying to figure out how much money we could get out of this institution, out of this transaction. I think it's going to be a lot. I see some of these HSB, these historically black colleges. They're mostly land grant, and some of them are moving to the profit part of the equation, and they're making out okay. So
I'll tell you what, Jack. The best I could do is take it. I'm not going to rule from the bench on this. I'll take it under advisement, okay?
Okay, Bob. So, have a great evening.
Thanks for calling. So that winds up another exciting adventure episode, etc., of Tall Tales. The Real Joe Cruz and I will be back tomorrow at 1600, 4 o'clock. See you then.